live. I think it goes live when I say it's going live, like when I press the button. Oh, I didn't plug in the cord. I have some screen sharing to do. Let's get that out of the way. Welcome to my live show that I was not prepared for, despite setting the time and planning it and waiting till the very last minute, which, you know, if it wasn't for the last minute, what would I ever get done? Everything happens at the last minute. Why not? It seems fun like that. There we go. Phone off. And do we want the chat to show up on the screen? I'm asking that because that's something I didn't do yet. So chat people, let me know. Let's see. Who wants me to put the chat on the screen? That's what I haven't done yet. Who wants to see how that works? So we can actually show how it works. We're going to copy this. And here's where it's going to get fun. We're going to remote in, because this is fun. This is what it looks like when we remote into the machine that actually has this. So we're going to go over here. And, oh, I guess I got to be on main to edit that. So we put it, we got to do a properties on the chat. At least I thought. Why isn't it working? Properties. Send clipboard keystrokes. And this will put the chat up there. That looks like the right chat. And then when it turns back, I can't do both at the same time. I can't share the screen and show how I share the screen. But anyways, all right, that's done. So that part's out of the way. Woohoo! All right. The never-ending windows, I know. But hey, now we have the chat on there and we have it all working, so we can see the chat. I can read the chat here, and actually we'll put the chat back in the chat box. There we go. All right, let me catch up on all the comments here. So pfSense lacks application filtering. Yep, that's correct. pfSense does lack application filtering. You can do application filtering in Untangle. And I mentioned this in my firewall review video, and I didn't dive deep into the application part of it. Kind of an omission, I guess, but the reality is, if you're looking for all that filtering, is how I usually put it. I blanket category into it for everything. Untangle has all that extra enhanced filtering that people are looking for. So it's one of those things, like, that's why we offer Untangle. Now, I thought it was funny. There was at least one person commenting that I will address something that the elephant in the room, if you want to call it that. Tom, you're not covering the Gartner Magic Quadrant. I don't think those need to be covered. That's kind of how I feel. One, I don't think there's an audience interest in it. Two, once you're that big of a company and you're in the Magic Quadrant, it's a completely different type of firewall. And we will talk about a few of them, because just because they're in the Magic Quadrant doesn't mean they're automatically a great firewall. I just feel like some of these companies are so good at marketing and have their own channel partner programs that create a bunch of people that are diehards for it because it represents the revenue model that they've built around reselling that product, that I don't think there's a way to get a fair comparison of it. But we'll talk about a few of them. I'll throw those in here. What else do we have? Oh yeah, the people asking about OpenSense, of course. Yep. Have I heard of missed? I don't understand the web server package question at all. That doesn't make any sense. Building a new TrueNAS core box. Awesome. Congratulations on that. Hello from Belgium. Just got my SAS card from the server on eBay. Very cool. Always fun building and touching the hardware and assembling that. Can we get a Mikrotik out of the way? Why not? And here's my thing, like, Mikrotik is another one that I don't think their hardware is all that bad. Their entire selling point is the fact that they're cheap. That's it. They're not better documented. Matter of fact, that's actually the most common complaint. People seem to want me to do videos on it because of the lack of documentation. And as I seen another forum person put, the way you solve problems with Mikrotik is going through forums and finding some secret incantation without any documentation of why you're putting those commands in, and someone saying, just type this command and the thing will work. But that doesn't necessarily help people, and that's part of the problem. A firewall has to have good documentation. Back to the reason I like pfSense. But I'm not telling people, and this is something I tweeted, earlier, and I said this to a bunch of people. I'm not telling people not to use it. Use what makes you happy. It's not like I know any reason you shouldn't use Mikrotik or you shouldn't use OpenSense. If you want to use OpenSense, use OpenSense. Go have at it. I don't really have an interest in learning it. And more to the point with OpenSense, I don't run into OpenSense in the wild. I pretty much have never seen it used. I'm not saying it's not used in businesses at all, but I've not seen it in any business we've ever taken over. We see pfSense, we see Cisco, we see Meraki, we see Mikrotik. We don't see OpenSense ever. Only people who have ever called us for support. We just did a support, someone needed help with something in OpenSense. And it is very similar to pfSense, so we were able to solve their problem. Always a home user. Always somebody playing with their lab that wanted to hire us for something. I've never had a business reach out to us and say, I need help with OpenSense. And I mean, it's one of those stated things out there. pfSense, on the other hand, is used commercially all over the place. I have a video about, open source in the commercial space. And for a while, I think it was either Visa or MasterCard. I have to dig up the video. I had a screenshot where they had a hiring post for hiring for their data center where it's used for pfSense. A guy I was talking to today had worked for a very, very large enterprise company that had 4,000 servers, and all their head-end equipment was a whole series at all their data centers was all pfSense. They never even considered OpenSense. It's just more commercially used. That's something the OpenSense market hasn't done. So it's like, it doesn't really encourage me to go over there. It only seems to make YouTube commenters happy. It's never been like a business who calls us for, no one's even contacted us for like a consulting project. Matter of fact, like every consulting project we have in the works is another pfSense consulting project related to building out a large network for companies. It's just very, very common. So thank you very much for, I was supposed to say, is it say Thelonious Mac? Thank you very much for the donation. It's greatly appreciated. Let's see. How do you organize your clients, your company serverless, like Windows Server, Linux Server, physical appliance? I don't understand that as a question. I organize them alphabetically. I see the question. I don't understand what you're actually asking there. Built my OpenSense seed Odyssey. Okay. What would you say are the packages a small business must have on pfSense to adequately manage and protect them against threats? You focus on the endpoint, the threat management on any, I don't care what magic firewall that's in the, category of expensive licenses or less expensive and open source. Most of the problem is endpoint, and almost every debrief you see on every hacking forum, or I should say every debrief on every hack related to, let's say the hot topic of the day is still ransomware, came from an email click. Their firewall was not the protection point. Trying to inspect and trying to sort out all the traffic on the firewall and expecting it to protect millions of endpoints in terms of application level, don't click on this stuff, is just not realistic. So when it comes to what should you have on there, you can run Suricata if you're running any services that you need to filter, but Suricata's, any of the IDS, IPS stuff is mostly blind to the applications in terms of understanding them better. It's such a misconception and so oversold to tell me that the traffic passing through the firewall, you could just stop all those magics, bad packets that come through here. They're encrypted. Many times that these ransomware attacks are sent out, they piggyback on existing services that aren't blocked. They're not blocking some random website. They're piggybacking and running them through trusted hosts like from Azure, trusted hosts from G Suite, trusted Dropbox connections. That's how they blend in. This is how all of this exfiltration and infiltration comes across, because they send them a Dropbox link. So it's not the firewall that generally is the solution for that. With 4,000 servers, would like that company managed centrally? They were managed, I think the person told me it was Zabbix. It was a consulting I did today with a really interesting developer building a new product, and we got into some of the history of what they had done prior to what they're doing now. It was a solid conversation, but unfortunately I can't disclose all of it right now. But if he may be watching right now, so I think he said around 4,000 if he's watching right now. But nonetheless, his company in the enterprise realm used a ton of pfSense systems to protect all their stuff. So. How much would it cost to stop you from talking about OpenSense? What would you like me to talk about instead? How about hardware notification failure on a server? I would say use your monitoring system for SNMP traps, or even a lot of the Dell system itself has notifications to send out to you for that. In our case, we're using, this, granted, much bigger solution. We're using SolarWinds to monitor things, and SolarWinds can get in and monitor via SNMP all the devices on networks. Yes, OpenVPN can be set up to run on your CARP connections in an HA system. Yep, built-in iDRAC notifications as well. I have iDRAC notify me directly for things. That's our internal servers that have iDRAC, because they're Dell servers, they send me notifications directly. So that's kind of a solution. But I wanted to bring up a couple things. So I'm done talking OpenSense. I've mentioned it now. I think I mentioned it enough. Let's see. Care to comment on pfSense and Omada Cloud Controller? Those are two different things. I don't know what the comment is on there. I've done reviews of both of them. There's my comment. I've reviewed both of these devices. Is there any other comments that you need? I have a video where I rant. I don't know. I'm not a real ranty person, but Fortinet's one of those companies that has some issues. Now, their issues have a lot to do with problems with the way they handle security, especially when you're talking about Fortinet not properly handling security. Matter of fact, they accidentally mixed up some code, and it was hard-coded passwords in it. It was occasional backdoors in it. It was also a custom request from a customer that caused a backdoor in their VPN product that allowed password resets. It was called the magic packet problem. And it was all because they just had a big mess of bad code going into this. And once it got discovered, it kind of became this big, disaster for them. And I'm like, this is the part I don't get. Like, everyone's like, but Fortinet's on Gartner's list, or Fortinet's a publicly traded company, and that's who you should trust. The other thing about Fortinet is they end up, because they're a channel partner program, and those channel partners get a commission on all the licensing. So those people become extremely defensive if you ever insult their firewalls. You can tell the Fortinet resellers, they don't believe any bad thing has ever occurred in Fortinet. And Fortinet, who has a monthly recurring commission to these people, they'll swear up and down how it's the best thing ever, blah, blah, blah. And that's one of my problems I run into. Those are harder to review, because the company wants you to sign up for an agreement to be a partner and everything else before they'll really lets you have it. We've run into them in the field. There's nothing about a Fortinet that made me go, wow, this is the most amazing, smooth running product ever. Matter of fact, we found one of them that we had to get tied to a pfSense. The Fortinet fanboy that was on the other end told me it was our pfSense's problem. It turned out that when we found out they had a Fortinet that didn't have the proper version of IPsec, it was a few versions behind. We got them to update it, which caused some grumbling because some license problem with the update. I don't know. I don't do Fortinet. And then it worked like magic. They updated the Fortinet. By the way, the Fortinet didn't have good logging. So any of the logs that we were able to, they gave us a login for it, but all the logging was so bad. Like the pfSense was telling us where the handshake was failing. The Fortinet was not. It would just fail, but not give an error message. And this is my experience of Fortinet. This is direct experience with it. Nothing about it impresses me, but boy, the comments when and the angry people when you try to talk about Fortinet, if you say anything not nice about them other than they're great. That's kind of my thoughts on Fortinet overall for that. I don't know if that's helpful to anyone or not. So, accidental backdoors. Oh, in multiple. My video on it covers a series. Now, there's two ways. I will absolutely admit security is really hard. It is super hard to code things securely. There are so many variables, and you really have to be a good programmer, especially in the firewall world, to program securely. Mistakes can be made. Buffer overruns can happen. Small, minor oversights. You're talking about something difficult. Coding a backdoor because you're lazy? Not a normal security problem. So it's what type. It's like I don't measure the CVEs a company has had because as a product grows in size and in popularity, there are always more security researchers looking at it. Therefore, you're going to find more bugs in that product. That's just kind of the nature of things. I accept that. How they handle those bugs or what those bugs were. Are those bugs backdoors coded into your system because you are coding poorly? Then that's a very different scenario than, hey, we built our libraries on this particular tool. This particular tool that we built our libraries on had a flaw that was discovered, and so now we have a flaw. That's a completely different one. So I'm very careful about how I say those security flaws are on there because I want it to be honest of whether it was the company and the practices that they have causing a security flaw or if it was actually a security flaw. So those are just some of the things that I've taken in and looked at some of those. Never heard of Mistborn. I don't know what it is. Never heard of it. Now, the next thing we're going to talk about, someone's asking about Mistborn and WireGuard. I don't know what that is. CyberFi is your own private cloud platform. It has a GitHub or a GitLab. I don't know, some type of cloud platform. Never used it. Out of today's topic. The next one down, let's talk about, I don't know why these are so popular, but let's talk about the Zyxel real quick. Hackers exploiting backdoor built into Zyxel. Are you patched? These are cheap. That's I've run into these actually quite a bit in the wild, but once again, you've got some closed source thing that has backdoors coded into it. And I believe there was 2 separate incidents they had. I just dug up the first one, but still, hard coding backdoors into firewalls for convenience seems like a terrible idea. And one of those things, it's not like they found a CVE in some tool or a buffer overrun. Someone found a common password in them. And this is just, I don't know, one of the good reasons I don't really care for some of these other products. There's a million different firewalls out there. And this is, I don't think it was handled as all that well. I don't think they fixed it right away. Once again, a lot of people seem to ask me about it. I mean, the reason I think, especially in the YouTube comments, why someone asks about a particular firewall so much will come down to them seeing it and going, hey, this is cheap. Look at I can buy this on Amazon for this much. Please review it because I want to know if it's good. Well, it's not. That's, sometimes some of the problems with those. Any experience with the Sophos ones? Sophos are interesting, but they require registration. So there's some type of closed source one. You got to register, get a license. They offer a license for home users. that's where I kind of stopped. It wasn't a compelling offering to me. There's nothing about it that said, wow, I have to have this. I even talked to a couple people that do use Sophos. Granted, I don't remember what their price. They told me what their pricing was. I can't remember at all. They thought it was overpriced. It was another MSP. They said it's okay, but we think it's overpriced, and we find it kind of clunky to work with. That was what the tech had told me. I've only ever really talked to one MSP that was deploying it, so I don't have a ton of information on it. If you use it and you like it, cool. They had a couple security issues, but they addressed them and got ahead of them, so they handled it properly. I don't know of any backdoors in it, but it's not a product that's on my radar at all. So if you want to use it, have at it. It does require registration, which that is also one of those things I forgot to mention with the UniFi Dream Machine when you set up their firewalls. Forced registration. That's usually enough to make people run around and pull their hair out going, no, I'm not forced registering my firewall. And Sophos, they grant a user license with a registration, I guess. That was my understanding because you can't just download it. The Firewall is weird. They reached out to me because they want to pay me to do a review, I guess. I'm not that interested in it. It's a consumer product that uses a phone application. Like, it seems their documentation is vague at best. It says we have VPN support. I don't think it really, I was reading through the documentation because a lot of people ask me about it. It's far off my radar. It seems like a good home user product. It seems to have a lot of happy home users. I don't want to take the time to learn it. And you know how hard it would be for me to play with a phone app to play with a firewall? And someone's going to point out they have a beta version of a web interface. That's my understanding. I don't know. Nothing about it that makes me say, wow, it's absolutely amazing and has these features that no other firewall has. That's one of my criteria. It has to be interesting to me. And usually things that are interesting to me are things that have really solid features that make me go, this is a neat product and I should use it. Those are criteria that kind of make me look at any particular product in general, but specifically today's topic is firewalls. And yes, I need to have an interest in it, and loading a phone app to control some proprietary little device seems odd. So maybe I don't know. What about Palo Alto products? I don't think I'm going to review them. They're well known. Everyone that likes them, I know people that use them, they like them. So cool. Have at it. And that's all I have to say. Like, there's Palo Alto's not a bad company from the people I've talked to. It's also, if I'm not mistaken, let me look this up, but I think that Palo Alto is also based on BSD. Somewhere. Here we go. Just, I don't know. I Googled it real quick. Checkpoint IPS. Checkpoint's on Linux kernel, and Palo Alto's coded on BSD, similar to Juniper Firewall. So, yeah, as far as I know, they're both BSD based. I've run into them in the market. I don't think they're necessarily a bad product. They're generally kind of pricey. So, but there's one of those ones that, pay it, buy subscriptions, get support type of business model. Azure's having another outage. I mean, what is it? A day that ends in Y? I mean, really? Azure and Office 365 having some type of outage? I think Untangle now has the ability to monitor some of the firewall stuff from the phone. I thought I seen an announcement like that. I haven't used it. I think it's kind of, matter of fact, pfSense works good on mobile. So you can log into pfSense on a mobile device as well, which is pretty neat. So it's just a web format, and that's different. Firewall has only an application that makes some type of calls to the firewall versus having a responsive responsive web interface, I should say, not website. But having a responsive web interface makes a lot of sense to me because, cool, I can shrink it down to all different sizes and be able to control my firewall. Okay, I'm fine with that. That means I would prefer to use my firewall on a full computer with a large screen. But if I needed to change a firewall rule and I happen to be on the same network and have access to the admin panel and its responsiveness will, condense down to phone size, well, that's cool. And I think that's neat. So I think that's a cool feature. DrayTek had a ton of security issues. I don't know what they all were. I just remember they were dominating the news for quite a while for CVEs. Let's look them up real quick. Remote code injection, stack buff overflow, remote code injection. Yeah, there's still a lot of remote management. Wow, these are a lot. How bad are these? How arbitrary are they, is what I should say. They always there was a lot of them that were really egregious, man. They had some terrible CVEs for a while. So what's the score on some of these? Not even rated yet. Yeah, so they haven't changed much since I last looked at them a couple years ago. Still scoring high on the CVEs for remote code executions. Yeah, that's not good for firewalls. And this one's recent. This one's published a few months ago. 2/24, last modified. 12 published date was towards the end of the year. So yes, they're still scoring high on the CVE list for some critical remote code. Critical remote code vulnerability is not something you like to see a lot of in your firewalls. I mean, I guess if you want someone else to remotely manage them, there's that. So that's my thoughts on DrayTek. Every time I've looked them up, they have a lot of high CVE numbers. So, pretty good firewall is a pretty subjective there. Why would you don't need a WAN uplink of 10 gig to get 10 gig behind there. This question's come up, or maybe you're the same person that's asked it a couple times. Someone asked this in the forums, and someone asked this on YouTube in the comments, and now I see it here. You don't have to have a 10 gig firewall to have a bunch of 10 gig devices on your network. You need a 10 gig firewall if you have to route greater than 1 gig or up to 10 gig at the firewall level. The inner VLAN routing, not all firewalls can even handle inner VLAN at 10 gig, but if you're doing it for storage server, they should be on the same segment of the network with 10 gig. Suricata versus Snort, I use Suricata. So that's my thoughts on that. But if you want to see some more advanced web filtering features of Untangle, would the new i7 version Protectelli support the 1 gig up and down? I don't know. Look at their site and compare their hardware. That's the usually they have their hardware. If you're not going to buy their hardware, then it's also not as simple as I want to do application filtering. Will an i7 do it? Well, how many computers are behind it? How many computers need application filtering? That's the same problem with Suricata. Can it handle 1 gig? Yes. But then you're going, hey, Tom, it didn't because I had 1,000 computers that all needed a bunch of streams to analyze. You have to think about the way data flows through a firewall. And when data flows through the firewall, there's all these different streams, all these different sessions. You have to monitor each session. So as the number of sessions is expanded based on the number of computers behind it and based on, are they a bunch of people with 30 tabs open on their computers, all pulling from different websites? Now you multiply all that together and we have a whole series of different data streams. How fast can it handle that volume of data streams? So it's not a matter of, do I need an i7? Do I need a fast processor? You have to scale it based on the type of traffic and the number of sessions that traffic's going to be create. So that's the part that becomes difficult when you're scaling up a firewall to understand it. Ryan, thank you very much for donations, and you're welcome for all the great content. That's much appreciated for the donation. So like I said, so much of it's going to be very, very dependent on the type of data. And even that's why when pfSense does VPN, it's kind of, the same thing happens in the car world to an extent. People just want to know the 0 to 60 time. And that they just get excited. Like, let's just compare some arbitrary stat. Okay, cool. We can launch the car off the line. We can get the car to accelerate from 0 to 60 in this amount of time. And that's what makes a good car, right? I mean, it's something that's always put at the top. People know it. But the reality is, if you're really thinking about a car, that's just one of the numbers. It is the least interesting number on the overall ownership of a car. Does it make my Tesla cool because it launches fast? Or do you care about how well it drives and what it does down the road and how much range it has and all the other details around it that matter? And it's very much equated to when you evaluate the firewall. It's not just about how fast it can take a single stream. And pfSense has this noted on their VPN speeds. How fast can it do a single VPN? Cool. We have 30 users. We need to know how fast it handles 30 users logging into it remotely and doing it. And they're not doing speed tests, those 30 users. They happen to have a whole lot of tiny little packets of mixed traffic going back and forth to the applications they access. All right, now you've changed the dynamics so much, so it may not work at the same speed. But people want it quantified to a simple number, and then they realize that's what the salespeople do, quantified to a simple number. But the reality of actually deploying and implementing and building the solution is different than that simple number. Hopefully that helps someone better understand the complexities of it. Is it worth it to install pfSense on other vendors' firewalls? I don't know. Sure. I mean, this has got pfSense on it. So this is just, these Protectly, or this one's probably a Quoton box. I don't know where this one came from at all. The different, solid state, I call them, no fan, no moving parts. These are pretty cool. And, we have them in our lab. Our preference for business production is to use the Netgate hardware. And the reason is simple. If a client has one of these, and this one's labeled lab. Actually, someone wrote Nintendo lab. I don't know why. It says Nintendo lab on it. Anyways, using this hardware, if a client has a SG5100 or an SG3100 or whatever they have, we have these things in stock. So if they have one that goes down, we can grab their latest config, load it onto this device, deliver it to the client, done. Boom, right away. We can just replace that for the client and get them up and running immediately. Matter of fact, we can preload it here at the office with their config file. So when we deliver it, we just swap it. And it's one of the reasons we like stocking the hardware like that. Oh, let's see. Can you explain firewall hardware is so expensive for this provided power? They build firewalls to be absolutely bulletproof reliable is the goal. So there's generally a little bit... They try to choose product that's going to last a long time. This goes for a lot of these different companies. The goal is, whether it's a switch or a firewall, some type of network infrastructure, it's going to have generally a little bit longer life cycle than the laptops, and a little bit longer life cycle than maybe the servers. So the goal is to plug it in, turn it on, and remove it for obsolescence, not because a hardware failure. So they generally put a little bit more time and effort and money goes into them in order to make them reliable. That's just kind of across the board what a lot of companies do. Now, some companies may make the firewall itself look cheaper because they have licensing fees, or they don't even cost, there's no cost to the firewall, so to speak, because everything's based on licensing fees. So somewhere along the line, you got to pay for the hardware and some development costs that may go into it. So there's that as a factor as well. So that's why firewalls are generally not the fastest processors, but they're reliable. And of course, this is what makes some of these devices like this with passive cooling so popular, because having a fan is one more thing to go wrong in a firewall. Site-to-site VPN in pfSense, IPsec or OpenVPN are fine. I don't know why Netgate doesn't ship with ZFS by default. That I don't know. What else do we have in here? Just saw you talk about DrayTek. It showed the incidents. They did quit with, and it's only DrayOS. So I have to look up DrayOS CVEs. Is that what you're saying? I've never studied the product line. So DrayOS CVE. Well, that doesn't find me anything. So I guess I got to put in DrayTek. I guess, what is a Viger 9000? Is this a model? I assume that was a model number. It looks like a hardware device. It's a hardware device with remote code injection. Granted, it's an older model, end-of-life product for that particular one. So what other CVEs were in here? DNS mask, shell shock bug. Well, that's an older one. Once again, there's nothing about them that's compelling. So I don't know. That's the other thing with them. I mean, do they do something better than the competing product? That's kind of if you know a product and you want to look at a different product, what does that other product do? Does it save you money? That's a valid point. If it's cheaper, how much cheaper is it? Are you familiar with the interface? Does it have good documentation to make things, for doing configuration, to make things easier to set up? Does it come with good documentation or support where I can contact someone? What are the licensing fees and things like that? There's a lot to consider on there. The DrayTek had, the cheaper DrayTek had DrayOS, and the more expensive had 3900 had Linux. Router. Now, the router OS, the big problem when it comes to the Mikrotik ones in general is just that comes back to Mikrotik checks all the boxes for. I think their switching is great, and it's not on my to-do list. I want to get some more Mikrotik switches, but because they're all similar and use the router OS, this has been. So a DrayTek 2962 is about the same price as an SG 3100. Okay. But because the Mikrotik devices, like this device here, that is kind of, whenever I want to look up something Mikrotik, I just boot this one up because it has the router OS on it. But they're kind of just cheap. That's what they are, but they're not well documented, and there's so much confusion on them. Now, I will admit, the ISP market that uses them, or more specifically, they seem to be really popular in the WISP market, because if you take a market that's very low margin, such as wireless internet service providing, I understand completely why they like Mikrotik. Makes sense to me. They build out the configurations. They universally have all their sites set up the same. So if they have, X number of towers, all those towers have the same stack inside of them with the same set of Mikrotik with a image that they know. And I've met some engineers. I was talking to one of them a while back on something else. I was helping them with a pfSense problem, but because their background was Mikrotik, but they had something they were interacting with that required some help, and they loved it, but they did it all from the command line. They knew the commands. They'd been using them for years, and they had spent a fortune on hardware because they had it deployed all throughout their entire infrastructure, from their colos to their stacks that they had for the all their WISP powers. everything was Mikrotik. They knew it inside and out. They took the time to learn it, and they had, as they put it, their own internal documentation and procedure notes, because they had to make it themselves because Mikrotik didn't have the best documentation. So cool, someone had took the time to learn it, and they were trying to tell me I should do it so I could do better videos, because there's still things that are hard for the newcomers. But I'm like, that's kind of the problem. Unless I'm become vested with the Mikrotik company. And they've also had some weird CVEs themselves, especially just goofy things because of kind of the unusual way they do it, which, back to, it's still not the most compelling product. It's just a good router at that point, and it's low cost and is what makes it attractive. When you comes to high-end features, we've seen tons of pfSense in a data center, and it comes back to, I was working on pfSense long before, before I was putting pfSense on YouTube, I was working with pfSense. So, because I seen it at large companies. We worked with it, I think it was 2013 at a bank. We started seeing large banking places use it for part of their internal networking and things like that. I mean, there's just a lot to it. So I like the Switch OS, though, that comes on these. When I've done my reviews, I did them based on Switch OS, because the Switch OS makes that manageable pretty easy. So Mikrotik has a wiki. I don't know that I would call it an amazing or good wiki. They have a wiki. Matter of fact, there's a good Mikrotik write-up in my forums about it. So one of the challenges is when we were reading it in my forum, someone had posted all the quirkiness between all the models. It was someone who has a lot of experience with Mikrotik and all the bugs that are in all the different models of which ones you should or shouldn't get because of problems and things like that, which makes it that much more confusing. I mean, for a home user, I would say the SG3100 works perfectly fine. I see someone asking about it, but the pfSense, the pfSense Netgate SG3100, generally speaking, is fine for home users. I have more than that running, and I'm running a SG2100 at my house, so. So someone said there's some Mikrotik videos by someone else. Oh, cool. So someone pointed out, if you're looking for it, this person has apparently a bunch of Mikrotik videos. They have a Mikrotik Firewall video. It's got a few views on it. I've actually found that, other than reviewing the switches, I don't know. That interface is just bad. That's one thing about the Mikrotik, is the interface is. He goes back over to it. It reminds me of when you used to write things in the early days of Visual Basic. It just has that look. I mean, whatever. If it's also, when one of my staff was using it, and he got really confused by some of the things in there. I don't know. Good news is, for those of you that want Mikrotik videos, this person apparently has them. I don't know if they're good. I don't know if they're bad. I don't know if they're accurate, but this person has them. Read through the comments and try it out. So hopefully that helps. One of the things too about Mikrotik, I see someone talking about the hardware offloading. This is where the confusion gets in, and you talk about things, and Serve the Home talked about this. They will check the box of layer 3 routing. And the reality is, this is a 10 gig switch for $129 that has layer 3 routing. but the layer 3 routing won't route at 10 gig. So it has switch ports that are 10 gig. It does not have the ability to route at 10 gig. But if you're not routing your switching, it will do 10 gig. Those are those little finer details when, I mentioned this in my video about my firewall review, where I talk about the fact that, quite simply, the firewalls, like when they can check boxes, that make marketing people happy, because people are trying to just check boxes. And it's also why I didn't just throw a box of check boxes and go, hey, look, both of these have this feature. The reality is the difference between having the feature and the feature being effective and usable are wildly different. So it's like even the concept of application filtering becomes convoluted. Has application filtering, and someone will probably go, yeah, but it doesn't work. And the reason why is, and they'll start breaking down because of the way things are delivered through CDN networks and such, that it can't understand the difference between something coming across a Cloudflare CDN and the originating site, so it has trouble blocking it. It becomes of how good is the application filtering? Can it actually identify the applications? And more applications have switched over to the QIC, Quick Protocol. So as things go over that, the solution's been disable the Quick Protocol. And now as things are going to more and more encryption, it's harder and harder to determine the application that's actually running on there. I do agree with you, rolling the dice here. I like that the SG5100 has independent ports rather than a switch ports. That's true. I will definitely say I like the independent ports. We use here at the office a 5100. This is the same firewall that runs my company that's delivering this to you as we speak. So I'm happy with it. I do like the individual ports. It just gives you some flexibility on there. But I really like the 2100 for home. I think it's a great choice for home because it's got the 4 ports on the back, and I'm actually using them. Well, let's see. What else do we have in here? Anyone else talk? I've talked about Firewall earlier. The Firewall is really just a consumer device. Sorry, it's just not an exciting device. It's just kind of a basic consumer device. There's nothing about it. It's got some neat home user things. It's also weird. It's controlled by a phone app. I think that's strange. They're working on a web interface. It's weird to start with a phone app, other than the fact that you realize they targeted the consumer market and maybe they want to target some of the small business market. They have a PR firm that reached out to me wanting to send me one, and I've so far told them not at this time. It's not a product that I have an absolute interest in. Stacy Higginbotham, Stacy on IoT, did a review of it. So if you look up a Firewall review, Stacy on IoT dug into it. I mean, it's pretty neat. It's got the kind of cool things people want on there. So what are my thoughts on the edge routers? Oh, I did the edge routers in a review already. Learn the command line. They're powerful. They're basic, but learn the command line. You can do a lot with them. Hopefully that makes sense. Anyways, I'm going to be getting going here because I have a few more things to go do today. I can't, well, I mean, I could be here all day. I own the place. No one's going to tell me to leave. Well, maybe my wife will. But I'm winding it down. I'm going to end this live stream at 5, which right now it is 4:49. So in 11 minutes. Is there any final questions before we get to the end of this? That we have on the topic I was covering today, which is mostly a lot of firewall stuff. May I pull up the firewall sheet again? My firewall comparison chart here. I mentioned the edge ones here. Look better, bigger. There we go. But yeah, the only thing and maybe I'll add application filtering to this. But yeah, it's not good on anything but on Tangle. And Tangle's the only one that really checks a lot of these boxes, but being that it has this paid in this column is enough to get people kind of, if you're looking for free and really solid application filtering, that's challenging, because getting those updates to make application filtering work well is not something a lot of people do for free. Why only 42 likes? There's 200 people. We need more likes here, folks. So smash the like button before we get down to the last 10 minutes here. My thoughts on Suricata versus Snort. I use Suricata. Use Snort if it makes you happy. I like Suricata in the ET Open rules. It's what I'm used to using. Yeah, Untangle for business. And you say Untangle's not cheap, but have you seen what Palo Alto and Juniper or Cisco charges? Their fees are in line with what some of those other companies charge. So I've actually talked to the dev team over at Sensi. Sensi's kind of a neat thing. I don't know why or where it all fell apart. I thought they were going to, and maybe they can't make it work with pfSense, but it seems like they should be able to integrate it into pfSense. IDS, IPS for a must for home users? No, most home users that turn on IDS and IPS just end up breaking everything trying to tune it. I have a video on how to tune it. If you feel like tuning it, awesome. Do I think it's a must? No, I think it's absolutely filled with false positives and will offer you, unless you're hosting something that you want to see someone incoming on, I don't think it offers home users much protection. I'm not even impressed with the level of protection it offers most business users. It's pretty basic. Yeah. Self-hosting, expose wide internet, or only behind VPN internal DNS. I minimally expose anything. People get really exposed to a lot of things that they don't update, and it gets a lot of things pwned. So be careful doing it. Make sure you have mitigated whatever risk may come with exposing things. You have to constantly keep everything patched, keep everything up to date, watch for flaws, make sure it's not misconfigured. If you expose it publicly, the botnets come after you, and as soon as they report back that they found a vulnerable version of whatever you've exposed, the immediateness, hell, even they've automated many of the exploits. So there are a ton of automated systems ready and able to exploit things you publicly expose. So be careful. Don't run old versions of software and leave them publicly exposed. My preference is to not expose anything unless it needs to be exposed. And that comes down to levels of convenience. There's certain things that may need to be, but as much as we can, we lock it all down. Like my UniFi controller, we put it behind a VPN. People ask why I don't publicly expose it. I'm like, why would I? And they're like, well, there's no known vulnerabilities, which, okay, cool. Why would I expose it? I don't need to expose it, so I keep my UniFi controller not exposed. Not what a lot of people do. Boy, if you do some searching for UniFi controllers, there are a whole lot of them publicly exposed and not locked down in any way at all. Any recommendations on best anti-spam and phishing filter for enterprise? G Suite. Proofpoint's pretty good. I don't know that any of them are necessarily bad. It's pick the flavor of the day. You know, there's a couple of them out there, and I think they all pull from similar feeds, but it's so hard to test them. Everyone has a story of their phishing system missing something. It's kind of as simple as that. None of them are perfect. That's the biggest problem with them. None of them are perfect. Figure out which one has the right price point for you that works. And you're really relying on their team, that they have a good team in place that's keeping their threat intelligence updated to stop phishing scams. It's not easy. And it's a giant game of cat and mouse. And of course, it's hard to test because any known phishing scam is known. So you can't just send it. A lot of times what the threat actors do is compromise some small company that is on a Office 365 system, and then they send out the suspicious email from one of the trusted partners of the target. That is one of the really common ways in. So that doesn't get caught in any way because they're like, hey, click this link. And then the link usually has some type of live off the land type code. They've embedded some PowerShell. They've embedded something on another Azure host. So once again, it just flew through all of your stacks of security and started deploying. And then the bigger problem is, why does one person in accounting clicking a link turn into a ransomware for the whole company? Did that person in accounting really need that level of access? Why weren't you compartmentalizing that particular person's level of access? That's where the bigger flaws come in. They don't contain the disaster by any measure. The disaster gets big very quick because the person with C in their title thought they needed access to every document in the business, and they're the ones doing the clicking. So it's pick the one that works for you. The UniFi access to the UniFi controller is behind the VPN, but the stun protocol that you're sending the data back and forth does not need, well, you can put it behind a VPN, but that one is publicly exposed. So you can get to the stun protocol so we can talk to the controllers. That is done through an encrypted tunnel, not a VPN, but it's the access control, the port 8443 default that UniFi runs on, that's behind a VPN. pfSense does not have an SD-WAN component. Also, SD-WAN's a buzzword. Please ask specifically what it is what you want, because lots of things are SD-WAN. What is the ask is the better question. There is no SD-WAN inside of pfSense, but what type of SD-WAN are you looking at? None. No firewall will get you the babes. Sorry. The TP-Link routers. Yeah, I mean, they seem to be a knockoff of UniFi, but like you said, there's also, if you don't tie them to the Omada controller, they end up with a different feature set than if they are. I don't know. I don't know what TP-Link's commitment is in the big picture to things. They're a consumer company. They're a Chinese company that makes they take a look at the product market that's out there. They figure out what's selling and they go, you know what, copy that. Let's sell a bunch of that. And I don't know. They've been around for a little while, but I don't know their commitment or whether or not they go through any, they don't have a bug bounty program. I don't know how their code auditing is at all. It's kind of fuzzy. And a lot of people have actually mentioned with TP-Link is not very long life cycle support, but they don't declare end of life, so that becomes confusing. Instead of end of life, they just quit sending updates to a device. The update hasn't come for the device. That's it. So I guess it's end of life. I don't know. They quit updating it, but does it need an update, or are they just done with that product? It's a little fuzzy. Oh, let's see. I've done an extensive review of Untangle. I didn't do a setup video as much, but Untangle's kind of, I walked through it in the review, but I don't dive into the details of creating rules in Untangle. But Untangle does have some good documentation. They have a good forum and community support. Maybe I'll do a video with Untangle covering an office setup, for example. $90 likes. Get a few more likes. We got 1 minute to go. How many likes can we get in 1 minute? How many likes can we get in a minute? TP-Link you can buy at the supermarket. They're definitely a quantity company. They're everywhere, that's for sure. Is Amazon a supermarket, though? They own a grocery store. I didn't even know you could do layer 3 on any of the layer 3 routing on their switches. I never really looked, though. Like I said, the TP-Link are pretty basic. I think they're kind of cool for some of the home lab stuff. But yeah. TP-Link doesn't provide fixes for the Archer C6. What? No one downvoted me? Weird. We'll just call that weird. pfSense does not do cloud-based. They don't have a cloud controller. So no cloud controller. If you want the cloud interface and all that fun stuff, go Untangle. They have Untangle does have an SD-WAN offering tied to their firewalls with everything else. So, and a cloud to manage it all. So a cloud interface where you can do it. Any more final questions? It's 5 o'clock. Time to wander off. Anything else for the good of the class? I got people messaging me, all kinds of fun stuff going on here. All right. Yes, pfSense does allow external logging. So you can log it to a SIM tool and export data to it. That's actually supported in pfSense. So that one's a good question. So cloud controllers are great for managing lots of places when you have many devices on many places to look at once. Trust me, once you start managing a whole lot of companies, it is helpful to have that. Yes, the Irish health system did make the news. But the pipeline was the big news here because oil is news here in America. Once you mess with the oil, you make a lot of people mad. So anyways, awesome. Thank you, everyone. Let's see. All right. If you want to connect with me more, head over to the forums and go ahead and sign up there, interact with there. I try to go to the forums once or twice a day to reply to all the questions that are in there. So thank you very much. Of course, I'm always on Twitter, easy to find whatever I'm tweeting about. And I think that's it. Awesome. And thank you.